I ran to see my husband in surgery, my breath trembling as I pushed through the hospital doors, the cold scent of disinfectant hitting me like a wave of fear. My mind was spinning, replaying the doctor's words over and over again. Your husband is being taken into emergency surgery. You need to come immediately. Those words had ripped the air out of my lungs. I didn't even remember grabbing my bag or locking the door behind me. I just remember running, praying, begging God to keep him alive, because despite everything we had been through, despite the arguments, the emotional distance, the unanswered questions, he was still my husband. And I loved him, or at least I thought I did. As I entered the surgical floor, my hands shaking uncontrollably, I searched for someone to guide me. Nurses rushed by, doctors hurried in and out of rooms, machines beeped in the background like a countdown I couldn't escape. I spotted a nurse near the operating room doors and hurried toward her. Before I could even speak, she turned, looked straight into my eyes, and her expression shifted from surprise to something I couldn't understand: fear. Urgency, recognition, ma'am, she whispered quickly, stepping closer. Listen to me carefully. Do not go inside yet. Please, hide behind this curtain and stay quiet. I froze. What? Why? I asked, confused, terrified, my voice cracking with panic. She leaned closer, her voice barely audible. Please, trust me. It's for your safety. My safety? From what? From whom? My heart started racing even faster, confusion fighting against fear. I had come here to see my husband. Why would I need protection from anything? What could possibly be dangerous inside an operating room? But something about her eyes, her sincerity, the urgency trembling in her voice, made me obey without questioning further. She gently guided me behind a large blue privacy curtain near the operating theater doors, my body pressed against the wall, my mind spiraling as I struggled to breathe quietly. I could hear the clicking of metal instruments, the rustling of gowns, the muffled voices of doctors preparing for surgery. Then the nurse whispered, "Stay still. Whatever happens, don't make a sound." She disappeared before I could ask more. Every second felt longer than the last. Sweat gathered on my palms, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. I didn't understand what I was waiting for or why I had to hide. But 10 minutes later, the answer came, and it shattered me in ways I never imagined possible. A group of people entered the hallway, laughing softly, not like medical staff preparing for surgery, but like a group who didn't take anything seriously. And then I heard his voice. My husband's voice. Not weak, not in pain, not like a man being rushed into emergency surgery, but calm, cheerful, almost excited. My stomach dropped. He wasn't supposed to be talking. He wasn't supposed to be walking. He was supposed to be unconscious on a surgical table. But he wasn't. Curiosity and fear pulled me forward, and through a tiny gap in the curtain, I finally saw him, standing perfectly fine, holding his phone, smirking as he talked to someone, and that someone walked into view a second later. A woman, not a nurse, not a doctor, a woman dressed in tight jeans and a stylish top, her hair perfectly done, her smile too familiar. I had seen her once on his phone wallpaper years ago, on a chat he denied meant anything. He had sworn she was just a friend, but there she was, standing in a hospital hallway, holding my husband's hand, like she belonged there. My entire body went numb. My mind refused to believe what my eyes were seeing. The woman leaned against him, laughing, and he put his arm around her casually, as if this moment was their own private celebration. Then he said the words that broke me. "Everything is ready. She'll be here soon. Just follow the plan. This will finally get me the sympathy I need." The sympathy he needed, the plan. My heart twisted painfully as the realization dawned. My husband had faked this entire emergency. The call, the panic, the doctors rushing. He had staged everything, and for what? Sympathy, attention, manipulation, money. I covered my mouth to stop myself from gasping out loud. Tears burned in my eyes, but I forced myself to stay still, just like the nurse told me. My vision blurred as I watched the man I trusted with my life whisper to another woman, planning something horrible while pretending to be dying. The woman touched his cheek and teased, "And your wife, what if she finds out?" He shrugged with a cruel smirk. "She's too emotional. She'll believe anything. By the time she even realizes what's happening, it'll be too late." His words stabbed into me deeper than any knife ever could. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My entire world collapsed silently inside that curtain. Then the nurse who had warned me returned quietly and whispered, "Now you understand. I saw them earlier planning everything. I couldn't let you walk in blindly." I looked at her through tear-filled eyes. Why would he do this to me? Why would he lie about something so serious? She squeezed my trembling hand. "Some people don't deserve the loyalty we give them, and today you were meant to see the truth. The truth." Those 10 minutes behind that curtain didn't just reveal the truth. They freed me from a trap I didn't even know I was in. I stepped out slowly, watched him laughing with the other woman, completely unaware that his lies had finally exposed him. I didn't scream, I didn't confront him. I simply turned around and walked away, feeling the weight of years of love, trust, and sacrifice fall off my shoulders. Because sometimes God doesn't save you from heartbreak. He shows you the truth so you can save yourself. And that day, I did. 10 minutes later, I saw my husband. Though I wish I could say the man standing there was still the person I once loved. But nothing about that moment felt familiar. Nothing felt real. Nothing felt like the life I had built over years of trust, sacrifice, and devotion. Instead, it felt like I was watching a stranger wearing my husband's face, moving with a confidence that didn't match the story I had been told. A man who was supposed to be in surgery, fighting for his life, hooked up to machines. A man I had rushed across the city for. A man I had cried for in the taxi, thinking I might lose him forever. Yet there he was, alive, alert, and smiling. Not weak, not injured, not even remotely worried. I stood frozen behind the curtain where the nurse had hidden me, my breath locked inside my chest as my mind scrambled to make sense of what I was seeing. I had come here shaking with fear, praying for his safety. I had imagined the cold, bright lights of the operating room, doctors rushing, machines beeping, his life in someone else's hands. But instead, I was staring at the man who had been the center of my world, acting like he was on some kind of private holiday. He leaned casually against the wall, his posture relaxed and confident, not like someone preparing for surgery, but like someone waiting for a secret meeting. I heard him laugh, a calm, quiet laugh that didn't match the fear I had felt minutes earlier, and that laugh did something to me. It broke something deep inside, something I didn't even know could break. It was the sound of someone who wasn't worried about anything, someone who wasn't in pain, someone who wasn't facing a medical emergency, someone who wasn't even thinking about the wife he had just terrified. My hands trembled as I clutched the curtain, trying desperately not to make a sound. The nurse had warned me, had begged me, to stay hidden. She had looked at me with a fear that didn't make sense at the time. But now I understood she hadn't been protecting me from the hospital. She had been protecting me from the man I loved. My husband checked his phone again, pacing slowly. "She should be here any minute," he muttered, sounding annoyed. "She always takes too long to show up." He wasn't talking about me. I knew it instantly. I felt it. My heart knew even before my mind did. Then she appeared. A woman walked into the hallway, her heels clicking against the floor, her hair perfectly styled, her face glowing with makeup that no one would wear to visit a sick man. She walked with confidence, with purpose, with the kind of familiarity that only comes from someone who knows they belong. My stomach twisted painfully as she walked right up to my husband and touched his arm like it was the most natural thing in the world. "There you are," she said with a playful smile. "I thought you'd be in the room already." He grinned back, and that smile, God, that smile, was one I hadn't seen in months. Not for me, not for home, not for anything for her. Every piece of hope inside me cracked as he slipped his arm around her waist. I felt my knees weaken, and I had to lean against the wall to keep myself from collapsing. I had come here thinking he might die, and he was standing here embracing another woman. Then he spoke again, and every word felt like a blade slicing through my heart. Everything's going according to plan. She'll walk in any minute, thinking I'm in surgery. The doctor will tell her I'm not ready to be seen yet. Meanwhile, you and I can finish this quietly. Finish what? What did they need to finish quietly? My mind raced through every possibility, each one worse than the last. I wanted to run into the hallway and scream. I wanted to grab him by the collar and demand an explanation. But the nurse's words echoed in my head. Do not go out there. Please, trust me. So I watched. My husband leaned closer to the woman, lowering his voice. After today, she'll have no choice but to agree. She'll look like the unreasonable one, and I'll finally have the upper hand. The upper hand. The phrase played in my mind like poison. What upper hand? What was he trying to gain from me? Why would a husband use an emergency, fake or real, to manipulate his own wife? The woman laughed softly. You're too good at this, she said, touching his chest. I almost feel bad for her. He shrugged. Don't. She had it coming. Had it coming. My breath caught in my throat. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. What had I done ever to deserve this kind of cruelty? I replayed every argument, every misunderstanding, every late night he claimed to be stuck at work, every tear I shed, every apology I whispered into the darkness. I had fought for us. I had carried our marriage on my back even when it nearly broke me, and he thought I had something coming. The woman stepped closer and whispered something I almost didn't hear. So how long do we have before she gets suspicious? He checked his watch. 10 minutes. He replied casually, she should be here any moment. And that was the moment everything inside me changed. 10 minutes. He had planned it down to the minute, down to my arrival, down to my emotional reaction. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't something he could explain away later with a lie or excuse. It was intentional, cruel, calculated, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel heartbreak. I didn't feel confusion. I felt clarity, painful, piercing clarity. The man I thought I knew, the man I ran here to save, didn't exist. The man standing in front of me was a stranger with my husband's name, someone who would fake a medical emergency just to manipulate me, someone who would hold another woman in his arms while I cried in a taxi rushing to the hospital. Someone who could smile while my world was collapsing. 10 minutes earlier, I had run into this hospital praying for my husband's life. Now, I prayed for the strength to walk away from him forever. Fire, a response that shook him to his core. Fire, revenge that left him speechless. Fire, a new beginning. I chose myself. The nurse warned me to hide, but at that moment, I didn't understand why. Her hand had gripped my wrist with a tremble of urgency, her eyes darting toward the double doors of the hallway as if danger itself was walking toward us. I had rushed to the hospital believing my husband was about to be taken into emergency surgery, my heart pounding with fear, my mind spinning with prayers and panic. But when she stopped me, pulled me aside, and whispered those words, asterisk, "Ma'am, please, hide and don't make a sound," asterisk, I froze. Why would she say that? What did she know that I didn't? This was a hospital, a place of healing, not a place of threats, and yet the fear in her voice didn't feel wrong. It felt like the truth. I didn't even know her name, but I knew instinctively that she was trying to protect me. Her grip was firm yet gentle, her tone urgent but caring. So, without fully understanding, I allowed her to guide me behind a tall privacy curtain tucked into the corner of the corridor. The fabric brushed my cheeks as I pressed back into the shadows, my pulse racing, my breath shallow. The nurse quickly adjusted the curtain, ensuring I was completely hidden. "Please," she whispered again, leaning close enough that I could feel her breath shake. "Whatever you hear, don't move." My confusion was growing into panic. "Can you please tell me what's going on?" I whispered back, desperate for clarity. She shook her head. "I'll explain soon. Just stay out of sight." Then she hurried away. I was left alone in the dim, narrow space between the curtain and the wall, surrounded by silence that felt too heavy, too thick. My fingers trembled as I pressed them to my lips, trying to hold back the rising storm of fear. Why would she warn me? Was there a threat? Was my husband in danger? Or was I? Minutes dragged by, each one longer than the last. The hallway outside was filled with the faint hum of machines, the soft squeak of nurses' shoes, muted voices behind closed doors. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening, nothing that explained her urgency, until I heard footsteps, slow at first, then louder, confident, unhurried. A man's voice drifted through the curtain, too familiar, too casual for someone supposedly being rushed into surgery. It was my husband, but he wasn't moaning in pain. He wasn't asking for help. He wasn't being wheeled on a stretcher. He was walking, talking, laughing. My breath caught in my throat, and I froze completely. His voice grew clearer as he approached. "Relax," he said to someone. "She must be panicking by now." Another voice answered, female, smooth, amused. "You're terrible," she teased. "You really think this will work?" "It always does," he replied calmly. "She trusts me too much." A chill ran down my spine. "Trust," he said it like a weapon. I leaned slightly toward the narrow opening in the curtain, my heart pounding. Through that tiny gap, I saw him step into view. He looked perfectly healthy. No bandages, no Roman 4 lines, no signs of pain. He was wearing clean clothes, not a hospital gown. And worst of all, he was not alone. The woman beside him stepped into the light. She was tall, welled, dressed confident. Her hand brushed his arm with the ease of someone who had done it many times before. And the look they shared, it wasn't new. It wasn't forbidden. It was familiar. My stomach dropped. He had told me he was being taken into surgery. He had told me to rush, to hurry, to get to the hospital immediately because it was an emergency. I had run out of my house half, crying, thinking my husband might die. And here he was, smiling, standing, holding another woman's hand. My vision blurred as tears welled up, but I didn't dare move. The nurse's warning echoed in my mind. Hide. Now I understood why. If I had walked in unsuspecting, if I had confronted him in that moment, I would have walked straight into a trap I didn't even know existed. The woman leaned closer and whispered, "What if she gets suspicious later?" He chuckled. "She won't. She's too emotional. By the time she realizes anything, I'll already have what I need." What he needed? What exactly was he planning? I felt my heartbeat thudding painfully against my ribs as I tried to piece together what I was hearing. The woman laughed softly. "I still can't believe you pulled the emergency surgery act." "It was perfect," he replied. "She fell for it immediately. I told her I might not make it. You should have heard her crying over the phone." A small sob escaped my throat, but I clamped a hand over my mouth just in time. He continued, completely unaware. "Once she signs the papers, everything will be in place." Papers? What papers? My mind raced. Was he trying to get me to sign something under emotional pressure? Something legal? Something harmful? My entire body began to shake. The woman raised an eyebrow, and if she refuses, he smirked. "She won't. She's too soft. She always gives in eventually." A wave of nausea climbed through me. The man I had loved for years, the man I had cooked for, cared for, prayed for, was plotting against me, using my love for him as leverage, manipulating my heart to get something he wanted. The curtain rustled slightly, startling me. The nurse had returned. She didn't look at them. She looked for me. Her eyes met mine through the narrow gap, and she mouthed silently, "Don't move." I listened. My husband's laughter faded as he and the woman walked down the hallway. their steps clicking against the floor until the sound disappeared around the corner. The nurse slipped behind the curtain with me, her face pale and tight with concern. "I didn't want you to walk into that," she whispered. "I overheard them earlier. I couldn't let you get hurt." My voice cracked. Why would he do this to me? She shook her head slowly. "Some people hide their true intentions well. You weren't supposed to see this, but now you know." Tears poured down my cheeks, but behind the pain, something else began to grow. Clarity, strength, awareness. I had been kept in the dark for too long, loved too blindly, trusted too deeply. The nurse placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to confront him right now. Take your time, think clearly. He's not in control anymore. You are." For the first time that day, I could breathe again, because the moment the nurse warned me to hide, she didn't just save me from heartbreak. She saved me from a trap that was never meant to protect me, only to destroy me. Fire, the trap he set for me. Fire, my silent revenge that broke him. Fire, walking away changed everything. I thought my husband was dying. Those words echoed in my mind like a nightmare refusing to let go, even though the moment had passed and the truth had revealed itself in the most devastating way imaginable. When the hospital called me that morning, everything inside me collapsed at once. The voice on the phone was calm but urgent, telling me my husband had been rushed into the emergency ward, unresponsive, struggling to breathe, possibly minutes from losing his life. My heart stopped. My hands went numb, the world spun around me, and I remember grabbing onto the kitchen counter just to keep from falling. I didn't even think. I ran, shoes barely tied, phone clutched in my shaking hand, tears blurring my vision. Every horrible possibility ran through my mind at once. What if I lost him today? What if I never heard his voice again? What if our last conversation, an argument we didn't finish, was the final memory I had of us? The cab ride felt like torture. I kept whispering, "Please don't die. Please don't leave me. Not like this." My voice shaking as I stared at the traffic lights that refused to change fast enough. By the time I burst through the hospital doors, my chest was tight with panic, my eyes red and swollen. I ran to the reception desk, barely able to speak. My husband. They said emergency. They said he's dying. I cried, desperate for someone, anyone, to take me to him. The nurse behind the desk searched her screen with a strange look, part confusion, part discomfort. Before she could even answer, another nurse appeared behind me, touching my shoulder lightly. "Are you his wife?" she asked softly, studying my face with a strange intensity. "Yes, please, where is he? What's happening?" I begged, gripping her arm. She took a slow breath, as if choosing her words. "Come with me," she said, but her tone wasn't comforting. It carried something else, hesitation, maybe even fear. She guided me down the hallway, past doors marked with warning signs, past rooms filled with machines and masked doctors. My heart thumped louder with every step, convinced she was taking me to the man I thought was dying. Instead, she suddenly stopped, turned toward me, and whispered urgently, "Please, hide behind this curtain, now." I blinked, confused. "What? Why? I need to see my husband." She shook her head firmly. "Not yet, trust me. You can't walk in there right now." I didn't understand. How could she ask me to hide when the man I loved might be living his last moments? But something in her eyes stopped me. Something that told me she wasn't protecting him. She was protecting me, so I stepped behind the curtain, my breath trembling, my fingers digging into the fabric as I pressed myself against the cold wall. The nurse adjusted the curtain until I was hidden completely, then she walked away quickly, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts. I thought he was dying, but when I heard footsteps approaching, not frantic, not medical, not urgent, I realized something was wrong, terribly wrong. A familiar voice filled the hallway, my husband's voice. Clear, strong, alive, but it wasn't the relief I expected to feel. Not even close, because he wasn't gasping for breath. He wasn't weak. He wasn't scared. He was laughing. "Relax," he said casually. "Everything is under control." My stomach twisted. This wasn't the voice of a dying man. This wasn't someone fighting for life. This was someone without a care in the world. Footsteps moved closer, and through a thin gap in the curtain, I saw him walk into view. My husband, alive, perfectly fine, wearing clean clothes instead of a hospital gown, and then someone else appeared beside him, a woman I didn't know, young, pretty, confident, the kind of confidence that only comes from belonging somewhere. Or with someone. She lightly touched his arm. "Are you sure this is going to work?" He smirked. "It already has. She thinks I collapsed at work. She thinks I'm dying right now." My heart shattered instantly. He wasn't dying. He had lied. He had put me through hell for what? For fun, for attention, for manipulation. I cupped my hand over my mouth to stop myself from screaming. The woman chuckled. "You're cruel." He shrugged. "I need her emotional. It's the only way she'll sign the papers." Papers. That word struck me like lightning. What papers? Divorce papers, financial papers, something worse. The possibilities swirled inside me, each one more terrifying than the last. My husband leaned against the wall, looking relaxed and pleased with himself. Once she's vulnerable enough, she'll agree to anything. She always does. The woman raised an eyebrow. "What if she figures it out?" He shook his head. "She won't. She's too trusting, too devoted. That's her weakness." Tears streamed down my cheeks, but they weren't just tears of heartbreak. They were tears of clarity. The man I had loved, supported, and defended for years had never seen my love as loyalty. He had seen it as weakness, a tool, something he could use against me. I thought my husband was dying, but the truth was far worse. My marriage was dying. My trust was dying. The version of him I had built in my mind had died long ago, replaced by a stranger who looked like my husband but didn't love like him, didn't care like him, didn't feel anything for me at all. The nurse returned and slipped quietly behind the curtain with me. She saw my tears and gently squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry you had to see it this way," she whispered, "but you deserve the truth." How long have they?" I choked. "I overheard them earlier," she said softly. "I didn't know how deep it went until I saw your name on the chart. I couldn't let you walk in unprepared." Unprepared. That word hit me hard. I had been unprepared for years, blindly believing every lie, every excuse. But not anymore. For the first time since entering the hospital, my tears slowed. My shaking began to settle, not because the pain lessened, but because a new awareness began to take shape, an understanding that the man I ran here to save was not worth saving. I stepped out from behind the curtain slowly, quietly. I didn't confront him. I didn't scream. I didn't collapse. I walked away, each step stronger than the last, leaving behind the fear, the manipulation, and the illusion of a dying husband. I thought my husband was dying, but the truth was simple. It was time for my life to finally begin without him. If you want the next 1,000 word part, like fire, everything changed when I walked away. Fire, the confrontation he never expected. Fire, when he realized I knew the truth. A whisper in the operating room saved me from my husband's biggest betrayal. They say the most painful wounds are the ones you never see coming. I used to think betrayal came with warning signs, cold conversations, late nights, suspicious messages. But nothing prepared me for the moment I learned the truth, not through a message or a fight, but through a whisper spoken in a room where I was supposed to be unconscious, vulnerable, and safe. For months, I had been dealing with worsening pain on my right side. At first, I blamed stress, overwork, and exhaustion. My husband, Armin, acted supportive, bringing me medicine, reminding me to rest, telling me he loved me. But every time I asked if we should see a specialist, he insisted it wasn't serious. Why waste money on tests? He would say, or it's probably just gas or muscle strain. You always overthink everything. I trusted him because he was my husband. I believed that he would never guide me wrong. But those small discouragements, those subtle dismissals, were the first cracks in the truth I couldn't see. The pain worsened until one night I collapsed near the kitchen. Unable to even stand, I begged him to take me to the hospital. He looked irritated, not worried, and muttered something under his breath about choosing the worst possible time. But with no other choice, he drove me there fast, silent, angry. The doctors quickly discovered I had a cyst that needed to be removed, not life-threatening but requiring immediate surgery. They scheduled it for the next morning. I remember holding my husband's hand, expecting reassurance, comfort, anything. Instead, he barely touched my fingers and even avoided eye contact. "It's routine. Don't make it dramatic," he said before walking out to take a call. But the next morning, everything changed. I was lying on the operating table, the lights blurring overhead. The anesthetic was supposed to put me out completely, but something went wrong. I wasn't fully asleep. I couldn't move or speak, but I could hear. I felt weightless, trapped in my own body. Floating in that strange space between consciousness and darkness, I listened to the voices around me. The clatter of instruments, the calm conversations of the surgical team, the beeping machines. Then I heard my surgeon's voice. "Before we start, let's review the consent forms again." The husband signed for full removal. Full removal, the word echoed inside my mind like a scream. Another voice, a nurse, asked. She agreed to that. She's young. Someone should have discussed alternatives. He insisted she wanted it. The surgeon replied, said she didn't want children anymore. My heart stopped. Children. I wanted children more than anything. My husband knew that. We'd been trying for a year. Why would he? The nurse sounded uneasy. "Something feels off. She doesn't seem the type to choose that." The surgeon sighed. "I don't know. The husband seemed in a rush, said he needed it decided today." A rush, a decision about my body, behind my back. A cold terror ran through my unconscious mind. I tried desperately to scream, but my body refused to respond. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in the monitor. In that moment, the truth slid into place like a knife slipping between ribs. My husband didn't want a child with me. In fact, he wanted to make sure I never had one. And he had used this surgery as his opportunity. But why? That answer came seconds later. A second nurse entered, whispering urgently, "Doctor, I just overheard something outside. The husband is in the hallway on the phone. He's talking to another woman. He said, after today everything will be easier. She won't be able to drag me into parenting or slow down my life. We can leave next month." Another woman, a plan, a future without me. My world exploded. I felt like I was dying without dying. Live in the worst possible way. The betrayal burned deeper than any physical pain. My husband hadn't just cheated. He had planned to alter my body permanently without my consent to free himself from responsibility. He wanted a clean escape, a painless exit for himself, paid for with the most intimate part of my life. The surgeon stopped. "Are you serious?" "Yes." The nurse whispered, "And he said he's been planning this for months." Months, the dismissals, the discouragements, the irritation, the avoidance. All of it finally made sense. The surgeon stepped away from the table. "We're not doing anything beyond the medically necessary procedure. Someone bring her chart and recheck everything, and get that man out of my hospital." A surge of gratitude and relief washed through me like warm light. It saved me, those whispers, that nurse's instinct, that surgeon's ethics. But the emotional wound had already opened, raw and violent. When I woke in the recovery room, the first face I saw was not my husband's. It was the nurse who had spoken up, her expression soft but firm. She sat beside me and took my hand gently. "You're safe," she said. "We need to talk." Trembling, I listened as she explained everything. The forged consent, the overheard conversation, the surgeon's decision to protect me. I felt disbelief, horror, heartbreak, and rage fighting inside me all at once. I asked where my husband was, and she said he had been removed from the hospital for becoming aggressive when they confronted him. He didn't even wait to see if I survived. When I returned home later that evening, the house was quiet. A single note sat on the table. "I think we both know this isn't working. Don't contact me. No apology." No explanation, no remorse, but for the first time, instead of breaking down, I felt strangely calm, because I realized something. I hadn't been abandoned. I had escaped. The man who was supposed to protect me had planned to destroy me. And fate, destiny, God, whoever writes the unseen scripts of our lives, made sure I heard the truth before it was too late. In the days that followed, I filed complaints, met lawyers, and began the long process of reclaiming my life. Every nurse and doctor who had stood up for me became part of the reason I found strength again. And slowly, so slowly, I realized something even more powerful. Sometimes betrayal doesn't break you, it frees you. Today, I'm healing, not just physically but emotionally. I learned that love can lie, but whispers, those tiny cracks in fate, can save you. I lost a marriage, but I regained myself, and I will never again allow someone to make decisions about my body, my dreams, or my life. A whisper in the operating room saved me, and that whisper became the loudest truth I've ever heard. I rushed to the hospital for my husband. It was a call I will never forget, shaky, urgent, and delivered by a stranger. I was standing in the kitchen, halfway through folding laundry, when my phone buzzed. A man's voice, breathless and unsure, asked, "Are you Armin's wife?" I felt my stomach drop. Something in his tone told me before the words even arrived that my life was about to split into a before and an after. "He's been in an accident," the man continued. "He's conscious, but he's in a lot of pain. They're taking him to City Hospital." For a moment, everything around me stopped. The humming fridge, the ticking clock, even my pulse seemed frozen in place. Then, suddenly, everything sped up. My hands trembled as I grabbed my keys. I didn't even bother changing clothes. I ran out wearing slippers and a stained t-shirt. I didn't care. Nothing mattered except getting to him. On the drive there, my mind ran wild. I kept seeing flashes of him, smiling, annoyed, laughing, like my brain was flipping through a photo album at the speed of panic. I replayed the last things we said to each other that morning. It wasn't sweet. In fact, it had been one of those small arguments couples have. Something about him forgetting to pick up groceries. Now the memory burned in my chest like acid. What if those were the last words? What if I lost him and our final conversation was nothing but irritation and hurt feelings? I pushed harder on the accelerator. Tears blurred my vision, and I wiped them with the back of my hand. "Please be okay." I whispered to no one, or maybe to God. Please just let him be okay. When I reached the hospital, I didn't even remember parking. I ran through the sliding doors and up to the reception desk. "My husband, Darman, accident. Where is he?" My voice cracked, and the woman behind the desk motioned for me to follow her. She led me through a maze of hallways that smelled faintly of antiseptic and fear. They placed him in a small room in the emergency ward. When I stepped inside, everything in me softened and shattered at the same time. He was lying on the bed, pale, dazed, his left arm bruised and strapped. A neck brace held his head still, but his eyes were open. The moment he saw me, a strange expression crossed his face. Not relief, not love, but something like guilt mixed with surprise. I didn't know what it meant at the time. I rushed to his side and grabbed his hand. "What happened? Are you in pain? Do you need anything?" My questions came out in a frantic string, breathless and raw. He blinked slowly, then said, "I'm fine. I didn't expect you to come so quickly. Didn't expect me to come." The words stung for reasons I didn't yet understand. The doctor came in moments later and explained that Armin had been in a minor car accident. His car was hit on the passenger side, and although he suffered some injuries, he wasn't in critical danger. Relief washed through me so strongly my knees almost buckled. But as the doctor left, something strange happened. Armin looked away from me, toward the window, his jaw tightening. "You didn't have to rush," he said quietly. "I don't want you exhausting yourself over me." For a moment I froze. The words felt wrong, sharp, cold. This wasn't how a husband spoke to a wife who just sprinted across the city, terrified for his life. But I swallowed my discomfort. He was hurt. Maybe he was just in shock. Maybe the pain meds were messing with his mood. I stayed with him for hours, brushing his hair back, adjusting his blanket, holding his hand. Every time I tried to talk to him, though, he seemed distant, distracted, like his mind was somewhere else, or with someone else. Nurses came and went. Machines beeped softly, and beneath it all, a silent tension crept in like a draft through a cracked window. As evening approached, I went to get him some water. When I returned, I found him speaking to someone on the phone, low voice, whispered tone. The moment he saw me walk in, he hung up so fast it was almost suspicious. "Who was that?" I asked gently. "Work," he said quickly, too quickly. He wouldn't meet my eyes. A cold knot formed in my stomach, but I pushed it away. This wasn't the time. He needed rest. Later, while he dozed, his phone buzzed on the bedside table. The screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize, a woman's name. The message preview showed only 2 words, "I'm here." I froze. My first instinct was to wake him and ask. My second instinct, stronger, sharper, told me to say nothing. Not yet. Instead, I slipped the phone under the blanket and sat quietly, pretending nothing had changed while everything inside me cracked at the edges. A few minutes later, I had to step out to speak to a nurse. When I returned, I saw her standing by his bed, talking to him softly, a woman I had never seen before, tall, welled, rest, nervous, holding her purse like she might drop it. Armin's expression, God, I'll never forget that expression, looked exactly like the one he wore when he saw me, guilt mixed with surprise, but this time it was sharper, deeper. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice unexpectedly calm. She turned toward me startled. Her face flashed with panic. Before she could answer, Armin said her name, the same name from the text message. My heart stopped. "You shouldn't have come," he snapped at her. That was all I needed. In that instant, the whole picture came together. The distance, the coldness, the guilt, the whispered calls, the strange messages, the fact that he didn't expect me to rush to him. He didn't want me there because he knew someone else would come. The woman fled the room, tears in her eyes. I stood completely still, like my body had turned to stone. He tried to explain, some nonsense excuse about helping a coworker, about misunderstandings, about timing. But the truth wrapped itself tightly around my chest. He wasn't shocked I rushed to the hospital because he thought I didn't care. He was shocked because he didn't think I'd get there before her. I looked at him one last time, not with anger, but with a final kind of clarity. "I came rushing because you were my husband," I said quietly. "But now I see the truth, and I'm done rushing after someone who never waits for me." I walked out of that hospital room without looking back. The moment the door closed behind me, something inside me opened, something stronger, braver, lighter. I rushed to the hospital for my husband, but I walked away for myself.